The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the nearly empty hospital waiting room, casting harsh shadows over a small child curled up on a too-big chair, her thumb nestled in her mouth. Alex rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the weight of exhaustion seep into his bones. He glanced at the clock, 1 more hour lost to the cold reality of waiting for a doctor who may or may not show up. His life had become a series of quiet battles, each one gnawing at his resolve, but today was different. Today, he had to be more than just a father. Across the room, a woman in a designer dress sat perched on the edge of a plastic chair, her eyes stark and distant, as if she were gazing through a glass wall into another world. Her phone buzzed incessantly, the messages flooding in like a storm, but she ignored them with a practiced indifference. The tension in her shoulders spoke of hidden burdens, invisible chains of expectation and loss. As a nurse called out a name, the woman's gaze flickered toward the exit, and Alex sensed a moment brewing, a fracture in the mundane. She stood, a graceful act of rebellion against the sterile surroundings, and in that instant, he felt the chasm that separated them. He had nothing to lose, while she had everything to gain. He was merely a man on the road, and she was a runaway bride, poised to step back into a life that could swallow her whole. Alex had learned to navigate life through the cracks of chaos. Every morning began at dawn, the world still wrapped in quiet when he would rise to prepare breakfast for his daughter, Ellie. He would pour the cereal and add just the right amount of milk, precise enough to ensure each flake retained that perfect crunch, while Ellie remained blissfully unaware of their financial struggles. The remnants of his dreams scattered like the shoes he no longer wore, once polished and ready for the corporate ladder they told him he should have climbed, now languishing in a closet. Being a father to Ellie was a role he had embraced after losing his wife, a chance at redemption that came wrapped in every smile she offered, every laugh they shared over silly cartoons. His days blurred into one another, marked only by school drop-offs and the rhythmic pulse of work shifts at the local garage, an honest job, one that kept their modest home heated through the harsh winter nights. The garage held a surprising joy for him, the engines, the grease-stained laughter shared with colleagues, the rhythmic sound of tools echoing against metal. He found solace there, even as the echoes of his past whispered doubts into his ears. A college degree sat untouched on a shelf in their living room, its potential overshadowed by the reality of a life that had folded in on itself like an old, weathered map. Yet, despite the burden he carried, he couldn't help but marvel at the innocence of childhood. Ellie had a way of filling the spaces in their home that had gone stale with grief. She turned the mundane moments into adventures, transforming their cramped living room into a bustling marketplace or a pirate ship navigating treacherous seas. Sometimes, Alex would watch her and think maybe she would never know the weight of his sacrifices, the hidden sleepless nights spent worrying over bills, the silent tears shed when he thought she was asleep. Maybe that was the point, to shield her from the pain he endured, to ensure her laughter remained untouched by the ghost of abandonment that haunted him. Across the waiting room, the woman sat poised in her designer dress, a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere surrounding her. The tailored fabric clung to her form, a testament to countless fittings, each stitch whispering of a life meticulously curated. The world had taught her to walk on a tightrope of expectations, balancing ambition and beauty like a seasoned performer, yet deep down, a void echoed louder than the glamorous life she led. She had built walls around her heart, each brick laid with triumph and polished with accolades, yet the hollow ache of loneliness resided within, a wound that never fully healed. Beneath her resolute exterior, sadness flickered like the fluorescent lights above her. She had attended galas where laughter rang out like music, yet somehow she remained an outsider, a spectator in her own life. The phone buzzing relentlessly in her hand was not just a tool of communication but a tether to a world clamoring for her attention, a world that often forgot to ask if she was happy. Her engagement had been a spectacle, her fiancé a golden boy with a perfect smile, and yet, she found herself suffocating beneath the weight of their future together, paralyzed by the notion of becoming someone she hardly recognized. In that moment of quiet discontent, her gaze drifted to the little girl in the oversized chair, thumb in her mouth, safe from the harsh realities that defined adulthood. There was something refreshing about the simplicity she saw, something that pulled at the edges of her carefully constructed facade. It reminded her of what she had lost, an untroubled childhood filled with carefree laughter, dreams untainted by the cruelty of the world. The longing stirred something within her, awakening a flicker of rebellion against the very life she had once craved. For a fleeting moment, she considered the possibility of stepping away from her gilded cage, of claiming her own freedom rather than the one dictated by others. Yet, the thought of abandoning her responsibilities felt like a betrayal, a chasm too wide to cross. She was about to slip into the everyday demands of her life when Alex caught her gaze, the weight of shared despair hanging in the air. Without words, they exchanged a brief understanding, a silent battle line drawn between the lives they inhabited. Alex's heart raced, sensing the shift in the air. He had become accustomed to navigating through people's burdens, offering a supportive hand when others faltered. The woman before him wore her struggle like armor, and yet he could see the chinks in her facade, the momentary flicker of vulnerability that echoed his own isolation. The waiting room, a backdrop of beeping machines and distant cries, became a stage for unspoken stories, a tapestry woven from the threads of abandonment and yearning. In a world that demanded their strength, perhaps they could find refuge in each other's quiet resolve. The fluorescent lights hummed relentlessly overhead as the tension in the waiting room thickened like fog, swirling around Alex and the woman in the designer dress. He sensed her growing impatience, an aura of anxiety radiating from her, and before he could formulate the right words to bridge the invisible divide, a sudden commotion erupted down the hall. A nurse rushed by, her expression grave, calling for additional support as a doctor's voice clipped through the air, laced with urgency. Alex instinctively stood, the remnants of his exhaustion forgotten for a brief moment as concern surged within him. The uncertainty that had gnawed at his gut twisted tighter. He hadn't come to this hospital to wait idly, he had come to ensure that Ellie was okay. The woman's phone buzzed again, louder this time, interrupting the fragile silence that held the waiting room hostage. She glanced at it, a flicker of panic crossing her features before she pressed it to her ear, her voice quavering, "What do you mean?" "I was supposed to be at the venue." Her words fell off, momentarily drowned out by the commotion around her. She turned her back on Alex, dismissing the chaos he could see brewing at the far end of the corridor as though it were beneath her notice. "Hey," Alex's voice cut through the tension, steady and gentle. "Is everything all right?" He approached her cautiously, reading the signs of her distress. She whipped around, her eyes narrowing. The expression could have sliced through steel. "I don't see how that's any of your business," she snapped, her tone sharp. She faltered, then, as if she was suddenly aware of the undertones in her own frustration. Her mask had slipped, the poise cracked. But Alex remained unfazed, his resolve palpable beneath the surface. "I can help," he offered with quiet confidence. "If you're in a bind, sometimes an extra pair of hands makes a difference." The challenge in her gaze faltered momentarily, questioning whether a man in a faded t-shirt and work boots could truly offer any assistance. The phone pressed harder against her ear, and Alex watched as her expression shifted from annoyance to recognition, a fleeting acknowledgement of the weight pressing down on her shoulders. She stuttered, and for the first time, doubt flickered in her eyes. "I just need to get to my fiancé. I can't miss it." Suddenly, the air between them thickened with the echoes of expectation, two lives colliding in a moment of urgency. In a flash, Alex's mind raced back to his own past, where missed deadlines and broken promises felt like an endless loop. Abandonment had shaped him, but it had also forged a quiet strength resilient against the chaos of life. "Your car?" he asked. "I could drive you, clear that traffic." She hesitated, assessing him with newfound scrutiny, the earlier dismissiveness flickering away like a candle's flame fighting against the wind. "You think you can just..." Her skepticism battled with desperation, but the mounting urgency in her eyes betrayed her words. "Just let me help." In that moment, as Alex met her gaze, the weight of a shared burden lingered between them, fragile yet undeniable. He gestured toward the exit, less a plea than a quiet invitation to trust. He could see the gears turning in her mind, the silent calculations of risk against necessity. The waiting room felt impossibly large and small all at once, the world outside promising freedom, while the glimmer of mistrust lingered. With a drawn breath, her defenses lowered slightly, her world of expectations clashed against an unexpected detour. She turned her back on the chaos for just a second, a moment where their paths aligned. "All right," she finally said, her voice retreating, the last vestiges of defiance giving way to possibility. "Let's go." He led the way, each step echoing the paths they had taken, her world of privilege and rigid control and his world of hard-won resilience, the lingering shadows of abandonment whispering softly in the background. Maybe this chance meeting, sparked in a sterile hospital waiting room, would lead them both toward something uncharted. Or perhaps it was simply fate guiding lost souls through the dark, reminding them that even in the harshest realities, help could be found in the most unexpected places. The parking lot was a maze of cars, silver sedans, rusty pickups, and an occasional luxury vehicle glinting under the midday sun. Alex scanned the rows with keen eyes, his heart thrumming with a mixture of urgency and purpose. The woman trailed behind him, her heels clicking against the pavement, an unusual sound competing with the deeper thrum of her anxiety. He could feel the tension gnawing at her, wrapping around them like a tight coil. "Is it that black BMW over there?" he asked, pointing toward a sleek vehicle parked at the far end. She nodded, her expression betraying a mix of irritation and relief. It was a vehicle that spoke volumes of wealth, of privilege, and of the life she was trying to evade. As they approached, her speed quickened, an instinctive need to reclaim control in a chaos that seemed to spiral around her. "Can you drive stick?" she asked, trying to regain her composure, her words tinged with a blend of surprise and challenge. Alex chuckled softly, his fingers brushing against the car's smooth surface as he responded, "I learned on a farm, that's all I've driven for years. Can't afford anything else." Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of respect igniting the moment before she managed to mask it with a forced expression. With a swift motion, she slipped into the passenger seat, clutching her phone like a lifeline, but Alex could see the remnants of her hesitation. Before either could articulate their thoughts, the engine roared to life, and the reality of the open road settled in around them. "Just keep it under control," she offered, half joking, half serious. "I'm not here to end up in a ditch. Trust me, I won't let you down," he replied, his voice steady, echoing with a raw honesty that startled even him. He had grown accustomed to the pressures of responsibility, but something about this woman compelled him to want to prove himself. As they pulled out onto the road, the city's skyline receded, and it felt like they were leaving behind more than just a hospital. The weight they'd been carrying began to lift, albeit slightly. Driving through the bustling streets, he could sense her unease merging with an eager anticipation, as if they both recognized the potential for change. "What's your name?" he asked after several minutes of silence, feeling the need to break the ice. "I'm Alex." She hesitated, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, and for a moment, he thought she might remain closed off, but then her voice broke through. "Clara," she said, and her tone softened, more genuine than before. "I guess I should thank you, Alex. For this and everything." Watching her, he felt an unexpected kinship forming, built on shared struggles, his, rooted in the ashes of his past, and hers, forged in the suffocating embrace of expectation. "Everyone needs help sometimes," he replied, glancing at her from the corner of his eye. "I only wish I could have found you before all this." The wry humor in his voice drew a small laugh from her, a welcome sound that resonated with hope. "So what's waiting for you at the end of this detour?" he probed gently, curious about the story that lay beneath her surface. Clara sighed, and the gravity of her answer hung heavy in the air. "A wedding," she confessed, bitterness seeping into her voice. "A life I never chose. I thought I could give in to it, but..." Her voice trailed off, and in that silence, Alex felt the shared undercurrents of abandonment permeate them both. "You don't have to follow through with it," he encouraged, his grip on the wheel tightening. "Sometimes, standing still feels safer than moving forward, but movement is what brings change." As they navigated the roads that twisted and turned around them, they began to forge an unexpected alliance, two souls seeking their own liberation from the paths dictated by others. In that transient space, they shared snippets of their lives, his stories of sleepless nights spent worrying for Ellie, her tales of hidden ambitions stifled beneath layers of societal expectations. Clara began to see a man who wore his struggles openly, while Alex glimpsed the fire within her, an ember waiting to ignite. At that moment, they weren't merely a man helping a runaway bride, they were two forces colliding and reshaping one another, forging new paths through shared vulnerability. And as they drove into the horizon, Alex felt a subtle shift, a quiet understanding blossoming between them. The burdens they carried began to feel a little lighter, the specter of abandonment flickering like the tail end of a fading flame. In this collaboration, forged within the confines of a moving car, a fragile respect grew, an acknowledgement that together, perhaps they could navigate their chaotic lives, 1 mile at a time. The car hummed steadily down the winding road, the world outside a blur of colors and movement. For Alex, the steady pulse of the engine was a reminder of the life he had fought to create in the wake of loss. He could still summon the memory of that fateful night when everything changed, the night he lost her, the light of his life and mother of his child, while they were still contemplating dreams woven together. The hum of that car engine felt a world away from the roar of sirens and emergency lights, a cacophony that replayed in his mind, a violent reminder of the night they'd driven home from a friend's gathering, one last laugh shared before destiny intervened. The police had arrived too late, leaving a shattered silence in their wake as they delivered the news. It was there, in the sterile glow of a hospital room, that he held Ellie for the first time, and the weight of an indescribable grief collided with an unwavering determination. He wrapped her tiny fingers around his, the warmth of her grasp igniting a flicker of hope amid the ashes of despair. With every coo and gurgle, Ellie breathed life into the hollow shell he'd felt he'd become. Alex had realized in that moment that it was no longer just about him. He was her father now, her sole protector, a role he embraced with fierceness, even as the struggle carved lines of worry into his brow. Life post-loss had been a series of trade-offs, a game of weighing sacrifices against the larger picture. The college degree he once pursued sat forgotten, gathering dust on a shelf, its potential overshadowed by the pressing reality of bills and broken promises. He poured every ounce of his spirit into providing for Ellie, returning to the old garage where he'd worked through high school. The familiar smell of oil and metal had pulled him back in, an embrace he was grateful for. It was hard work, underappreciated and often grueling, but the camaraderie he found there was unmatched. The garage became a refuge, a place where laughter echoed above the sound of hammers striking metal, where men shared stories of their own struggles, reminding him he wasn't alone in navigating the murky waters of life. Yet, beneath the laughter, unease simmered just beneath the surface. The shadow of his past whispered doubts at night, questioning if he was enough to fill the void left behind. The world outside moved on, filled with couples sharing dreams and aspirations, while he found himself tethered to a life he hadn't chosen but would defend fiercely. The memories of a future that might have been gnawed at him, the ambitions he let slip through his fingers in favor of a quieter existence, a simpler life that seemed somehow more noble. There were moments when he caught himself staring into the distance, haunted by the flicker of brilliance he had once envisioned for himself, aspirations that faded against the backdrop of survival. But in those moments of doubt, he always looked to Ellie, her laughter ringing through their modest home like a beacon of light amidst the storm. Her innocence was a balm to the wounds that life had carved, a stark contrast to the years of grief and heartache he had come to know. Every time he watched her transform their living room into a kingdom of imaginary play or engage in the simple joy of a backyard picnic, he felt a rush of hope. She was unaware of the burdens he carried, the financial struggles that fought for his attention, and perhaps that was the only way to protect her from the harshness of reality, the one thing he promised to do. As he turned to glance at Clara, her expression mirrored the same vulnerability, the glimmer of rebellion that strung between them like an invisible thread. He sensed the unspoken tales hiding behind her designer dress, the burdens she bore beneath layers of expectation and glamour. "You ever think about what you'd be doing if life hadn't veered off course?" he asked, the question hanging in the air. He saw her freeze momentarily, as if she were caught in a tangled web of her own thoughts, and for a fleeting moment, their lives intersected in shared recognition, as if they both were struggling to claim their identities in a world that sought to define them. Clara exhaled slowly, her eyes drifting toward the window as the landscape shifted outside. "Sometimes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I'd be building my own empire, not standing on the verge of a wedding I'm terrified to face." The vulnerability in her tone caught him off guard, and Alex felt a flicker of connection deepen between them. The fear she spoke of felt achingly familiar, a ghost of his own battles reflected in her hesitation. He could see the cracks in her armor, the disillusionment that lay beneath her polished surface. It was a glimpse into a world where the pursuit of dreams had been abandoned in favor of expectations. "I always thought I'd be an engineer," Alex shared, his heart laid bare. "But the moment Ellie came into my life, that dream faded into the background. I've been too busy trying to keep both of us afloat to chase what might have been." He marveled at how easily the words flowed, how Clara seemed to draw out a part of him he had long buried beneath layers of responsibility and grief. "Sometimes, I wonder if I made the right choice," he added, glancing sideways at her. But seeing her smile, "That's everything now." Clara nodded slowly, her thoughts visibly shifting beneath the weight of his honesty. "I think we've both lost ourselves in our situations, haven't we?" Her voice trembled slightly, as if acknowledging the uncharted territory of her own fears and desires. The honesty resonated deeply with Alex, as if they were both unveiling their truths in the vulnerability of their shared experience. "I didn't even realize how trapped I felt until you offered to help." The road stretched open before them, and for the first time, Alex felt a flicker of hope bloom within him, a mutual recognition of the power in vulnerability, of the possibility that lay in choosing to step away from the shadows of abandonment, even when it felt like an insurmountable chasm. They were both navigating complex currents. Perhaps this moment, this detour, could steer them both toward liberation. As Clara's expression shifted, revealing the complexity of her own surrender and reclamation, he knew that their paths had crossed for a reason. The silent action of acceptance, the understanding that they were visible to one another, held the potential for change greater than either of them had anticipated. In that moment, with the wind whipping through the open windows and the road unwinding before them, they both dared to dream again. Together. The hum of the engine filled the car with a comforting rhythm, but beneath the surface, Alex and Clara were both grappling with the burgeoning currents of change swirling around them. As they drove further away from the hospital and the chaos behind, the air thickened with unspoken tension, each beat of the tires against the asphalt echoing their collective uncertainty. The world outside transformed from urban sprawl to open fields, the horizon stretching into infinity, but within the confines of the car, the atmosphere crackled with the promise of a new beginning. Just as Alex felt the weight of responsibility begin to shift, the peaceful facade shattered. A sudden jolt sent the car swerving as Clara's phone erupted in chaos beside her, a family group chat that erupted with frantic messages. "No, no, no," she gasped, her fingers flying over the screen, her composure fracturing in an instant. Alex shot her a glance, his heart pounding, her previously cool demeanor replaced by panic as she scrolled through the messages, her expression shifting from disbelief to alarm. "Clara," he prompted cautiously, concerned that the chaotic whirlwind of her past was rushing back in. "What's happening?" She glanced up, her eyes wide, the reality of her situation crashing over them like a tide. "The venue. They're canceling everything." Her voice trembled, barely containing the tremors of a panic she tried desperately to suppress. "I can't face them. I need to get back." With each frantic word, the gravity of her predicament overshadowed the moment of connection they had been forging. A part of Alex surged with instinctual protectiveness, the father in him stepping into overdrive. "You can't just turn back now, Clara. If they're canceling, that means you're free from a life that doesn't fit you," he urged, determination pushing through the swell of her fear. Yet, in the back of his mind, he felt the weight of his own unresolved choices. He had felt hopelessly trapped at times, too, but today felt different. "Free," she echoed incredulously, her tone sharp, as if the idea of freedom clashed violently with her ingrained notions of responsibility. "What if they need me? This isn't just about me, Alex. It's about everyone depending on my choice." Her intensity rattled him, and he recognized that beneath her polished exterior lay the relentless burden of expectation, an illusion they were all too often handed. "But what if you're not their anchor? What if you didn't have to bear the weight of their dreams?" he countered, his voice steady. "You don't have to return to the chaos you're escaping. You can choose your own path." He couldn't shake the feeling that he was urging her toward the personal liberation he had long sought himself, a chance to step outside the shadows of abandonment, whether it came in the form of a marriage unchosen or the loss that haunted him. Clara fell quiet, her breaths coming in rapid succession as she wrestled with the turmoil within. As they continued down the road, Alex caught sight of a small roadside diner ahead, its neon sign flickering like a lighthouse in the storm of their emotions. "Let's take a break," he suggested gently, sensing the urgency of the moment. "You need to think clearly." Reluctantly, she nodded, and as they pulled into the parking lot, the weight of their intertwined fates loomed larger than ever. Inside the diner, the atmosphere shifted again, the smells of coffee and fried food wrapped around them like a hug, while the chatter of patrons buzzed in the background, muffling the chaos of the outside world. They settled into a booth, Clara's phone still clutched in her hand, a lifeline to her past she was both desperate to cling to and terrified to face. "Look," Alex began, lifting his mug of coffee to steady his nerves, "you can choose to let those messages dictate your future, or you can own your story. I know what it feels like to be torn apart by expectations, to have previous commitments weigh you down. You don't owe them anything if it costs you your happiness." He met her gaze, the sincerity of his words hanging between them, and she felt the walls she'd built around her heart begin to fracture, the vulnerability she had tucked away surfacing with a flicker of vulnerability. "I get what you mean, Alex," she admitted quietly, her voice barely breaking above the din, "but this isn't just about me. They've invested so much time and effort. What if I walk away and it all falls apart?" Suddenly, the idea of responsibility felt foreign in her mouth. She had been the one to accept the weight of those expectations, one she had clung to for far too long. "I thought that stepping into this life would give me purpose, but maybe it's just stolen my freedom," she concluded, her realization potent yet fragile. In that moment, she recognized the truth in his words. How often had she used responsibility as a shield against her own desires? The thought shifted something within her, a sense of clarity piercing through the fog of uncertainty. You're right," she murmured, her eyes welling with tears yet unbidden. "I don't think I can do it alone anymore." Alex reached across the table, the warmth of his hand bridging the rift between them. In that simple gesture, he offered strength, reminding her that no matter how overwhelming the world outside felt, they could forge a new path together, guided by the vulnerability they were both embracing in their lives. And despite the chaos swirling around them, the realization dawned, maybe they could be each other's anchors, moments of calm amidst turbulent seas, guiding one another toward renewal and self-discovery. As Clara took a deep breath, the feeling of empowerment surged, countering the pull of abandonment that had seeped into their lives. She realized, with an open heart, that from this moment on, she would choose a path that valued connection and authenticity, one that carried hope beyond the confines of expectation. Alex felt the same shift within himself, a newfound resolve to leave behind not just his old ways but the chains that once bound him. They could build a new story together, a transformation rooted in shared resilience. And as the sun streamed through the diner windows, illuminating their lives with the promise of possibility, they clutched at the hope that perhaps this detour was exactly what they had both needed, a chance to embrace their truths at last. As they sat in the diner, wrapped in the warmth of shared vulnerability, a sense of calm settled around them, weaving through the echoes of their tumultuous pasts. Clara fiddled with the edges of her napkin, her fingers tracing the delicate folds as if trying to piece together a future that had always felt just out of reach. Each crease reminded her of the divisions she had navigated, stitched together by the expectations of others. In the corner of the diner, a young mother cradled her child, her laughter ringing out like a melody that reminded Alex of Ellie. The little girl, perhaps 4 or 5, had fallen into giggles over a handful of crayons spilled across the table. She bent down, her tiny hands reaching for the vibrant colors, her face lighting up as if the world were made of possibilities. Alex watched as the girl handed a crayon to her mother, a small gesture of love and trust that resonated deeply within him. "Look at that," he murmured, nodding toward the duo. Clara glanced over, her gaze softening as she observed the scene. "Pure joy in the simplest things," she said quietly, her voice laced with longing. The little girl's laughter was infectious, a bright affirmation of life that cut through the diner's faded walls. In that moment, they shared a silent understanding, eyes locked for just a heartbeat longer than necessary. Alex's heart swelled at the thought of Ellie, her innocence a reminder of what it meant to find joy in the mundane, to forge connections that could never be severed by societal pressures. Clara's expression shifted, the weight of her burdens momentarily lifting as she felt the warmth of possibility coiling around them like a gentle embrace. "In the end," she whispered, "it's about finding joy in our own lives." He nodded slowly, feeling the quiet acceptance settle into his bones, a soft promise of new beginnings. As they returned to the present, the weight of their abandoned pasts faded into the background, leaving only the lingering echoes of laughter floating through the air, illuminating the path ahead, one step at a time. And in that diner, amidst the chaos of life, they no longer felt abandoned.